this one from one from Norma, and this one from Cavalleria Rusticana, and so forth. And I explained I was the first dancer. I was the premier danseuse. And so I explained I really had no music. I couldn't sing that sort of thing. So he asked if I would sing a spiritual by chance. Well, it's not by chance, it's by design. First half of this side of the room. So of course, I mean, we had no television or Mad Comics. We didn't even have Ebony. So, rituals. Well, people came out and sang La Donna Immobile, and so forth, and so forth. And it was all their efforts were well received. And then I went out onto the stage, and there was a 120-piece orchestra in the pit, and naturally they couldn't help me with their violins and tubas and celli, and so I just told them lay out, you see. And I sang, I am a poor pilgrim of sorrow, and I'm lost in this wide world alone. And 4,500 Arabs stood up and applauded. Now, until you've sung Steal Away and had 4,500 Arabs sing it with you in Arabic, you have not tripped. It tells you something about a contribution. It tells you something about poetry, about great, great art. So great, so vital, that little white boys in Liverpool, hundreds of years later, are able to take the foundation of that contribution and build a music that they can understand on it. If you don't believe that so, listen to Let It Be by the Beatles. I assure you, in that little town in Arkansas, we sang that not only in service, but we sang it in the prayer meetings on Monday night. And I'm talking about 30 years ago, and it wasn't new then. So it tells you something about poetry. Poetry speaks immediately to the heart. Now, unfortunately, Mark Twain says, if you would have a man enslaved, the first thing you must do is convince yourself that the man is subhuman. The second thing you must do is convince your allies that the man is subhuman. But the third and the unkindest cut of all is to convince that man that he's subhuman and deserves his enslavement. Now, if a comprehensive job is done, obviously one doesn't have to do any more. The initiator has nothing else to do. Obviously, the man perpetuates it. He keeps it alive. The other person keeps it alive. Everyone keeps it alive. Thus, anything the man does is sub. It's inferior. So we see jazz, blues, the spirituals, and so forth looked upon not as classical music. Classical music means white music. Classical poetry means white poetry. You see? You see? Now, look at a music. Look at a music. Look at a poetry that is understood by Chinese, by French, by anybody who hears it, anywhere. I've been very fortunate. I've lived around this world, and I'm fortunate in that I speak quite a few languages. And I've lived in places. I don't mean I've gone there as a tourist. Usually I've gone and worked in countries. And because I speak the language, I accept my responsibility as a human being, because I don't allow man-made barriers between human beings. I listen and I learn. And so I have found that my music, the music created in the most unbelievable of circumstances, oppressive circumstances that have never been known in the history of man, in slavery, and chattel slavery, a new kind of slavery, which was created in particular in these yet-to-be United States. And that music inspires people. Fantastic, right? Isn't that exciting stuff? James Weldon Johnson wrote a poem. James Weldon Johnson, a black American poet who very few white Americans know about and not enough black Americans know about. And it's a pity, it's a shame, and I mean a shame on the ignorant, because the documents are there. A black man, a great poet, who at the turn of the century wrote a poem called "O Black and Unknown Bards." He questions, how came your lips to touch the sacred fire? How, in your darkness, did you come to know the power and the beauty of the minstrel's lyre? This man was a consul, United States consul, to Nicaragua and to Venezuela, and after was the field and then general secretary of the NAACP. A poet, a living, active, vital poet who wrote what later became known as the Negro National Anthem. Mr. James Weldon Johnson. How many of you know the Negro National Anthem? How many of you have never heard it? Please, let me see, let's share. Well, then I'm going to sing some with for you. It's such a fantastic song. It so inspires. And those of you who know it, share it with me now. Okay? Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmony of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the roaring sea. Sing a song full of the hope that the darkness has told us. Sing a song full of the faith that the prison has brought us. Facing a rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. I applaud Mr. James Weldon Johnson. Now listen, in the South where I grew up, we stood as youngsters on one foot and said, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, which come one race, lift every voice and sing till earth and, oh, say, can you see? Always in the same key and standing on the same foot. And we thought in that little town that that was the way everybody did their thing. Until I came west at about 13, and I found that blacks didn't know, nor whites had never heard of the Negro National Anthem, written by Mr. James Weldon Johnson, a great poet who took the black American preacher who speaks, really, he's like a Jewish cantor, very much. In this area, there's a great similarity in that the black American preacher preaches on pitch and in time. He said, now, brothers and sisters, won't y'all listen to me? Do you love God? And you can hear the rhythms, unspoken, endemic to the art form. And it is an art form. Mr. James Weldon Johnson was able to capture it in the sermon and in a poem called Go Down There, a great poem. We go on. Did you know, for instance, that the second piece of work published by a woman in the United States was published by a black woman? Did you know that? That's right. A woman brought to this country as a girl at about 10, and by 17, writing in a second language, mind you, a slave, a foreigner, In the early 1770s, she published her work, Miss Phyllis Wheatley. Now, I don't agree with the content of her work because it was very negative. It was suicidal, racially suicidal. But I must appreciate the feat. It was a great achievement. And one of the difficulties we have as a people, and I don't mean black, but I mean as a people, as an American people, is that we don't understand each other's heroes. Oftentimes we don't know our own heroes. Oftentimes, too often. People survive in direct relationship to the heroes they have. And those don't have to be tangibles. That is, they don't have to be flesh and blood and have a name. And so it might be a spiritual. It might be a dance. It might be a dream dreamed. I'll tell you something about a white American hero. First of all, before I tell you about this particular man, in the 1900s, there were white Americans who were noble Americans, who were anti-slavery, not necessarily the abolitionists, who I certainly respect and am grateful for, but men and women who risked and sometimes lost their lives to eradicate slavery, not because they loved blacks, but because they loved truth. Noble Americans, lost in our history books, lost forever in our history books. Young whites today who consider themselves radicals and revolutionaries think they are doing something new. It is not new. The men and women in the 1800s who really should have great monuments, or certainly evenings devoted to talking about them, are either called madmen or ignored. But let me tell you something about Thomas Jefferson, a slave owner. He wrote in 1790 to the American people, the white Americans. He said, "Let us send these people home now and give them whatever remuneration we can raise. It will take them 5 generations to forgive us for what we've done, and it will take us 5 generations to erase the erroneous idea that they are inferior to us." 1790. Let's go on. I told you I was going to speak about poetry, and it just... Frances Harper, a lady in who lived, I think born about 1820 or so, black lady, who became very active in the abolitionist movement, understandably, and who then went on to become very popular after slavery, after the Emancipation Proclamation. She became very popular in the temperance groups, and then spoke for women's liberation in about 1870. Interesting. She had a poem called The Slave Auction. The sale began. Young girls were there, defenseless in their wretchedness, whose stifled sobs of deep despair revealed their anguish and distress. And mothers stood with streaming eyes and saw their dearest children sold. Unheeded rose their bitter cries, while tyrants bartered them for gold. And woman, with her love and truth, for these in sable forms do dwell, gazed on the husband of her youth with anguish none might speak or tell. Miss Harper wrote this, not about something she'd heard of or felt for, but what she really saw. She was there. She saw the slave auction, when human beings stood fettered and enchained and were bought by other human beings as Sir Sterling Brown says, to give a few gentlemen ease. Now, a poet is asked always to collect the essence of a condition, the essence. Naturally, because I am trying to be a poet, and trying to be a poet is like trying to grow up, or trying to be a good Christian, or a good Jew, or a good Muslim, good Buddhist. At 80, I will still be trying to be a poet. Because I am trying to be a poet, and I am published and so forth, I receive a lot of manuscripts from would-be poets, or poets en route to poetry. Too often, they have not done their homework. Too often they are doing a kind of stream of consciousness poetry, which has its own value, I'm certain. I don't mean to put it down. But I do know that poetry asks you to take the total experience and bring it down to an essence so that one human being reading it in Iowa will have a reaction to it, although it was written in London. Now, years ago, when I was young, very young, I've listened to Shakespeare. I listened, and I took from Shakespeare what I could use. So I suggest to whites to take this poetry, listen to it, read it, take from it what you can use. All culture is like the air. It is free. It is made, created by human beings for human consumption. Shakespeare says, when in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone bemoan my outcast state. I trouble a deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed. I'm desiring this man's art and that man's scope, and with what I most enjoy, I'm contented least. Now in that sonnet, that man, that Englishman, captured something about the human condition that is undeniable. I understand it. I agree. I know it well. When I read it as a young person, I liked it. As I get older, I love it. I understand. I begin to fit into it as into a suit of armor. It's right. You write, I write personally through the black experience because that's what I know. I'm talking about the human condition. I was married to a man once who told me that the black American represented the best an African could dream of being. I agreed with that for years. But I've come to the conclusion that the black American represents the best man can dream of being, can endure, can survive, and even thrive on. A formidable people. People brought here first in 1619, 1 year before the Mayflower docked. It's sad to say the American Indian to whose continent we were brought, strangers in chains and slaves more so, are now less than 600,000 in the whole United States. The black American is upwards of 30 million, and that's a conservative estimate. I have one friend who says there are more than 30 million black people in the Baptist church. And he's not counting backsliders either. So we see the value, then, of the ability to give out and to take what you possibly can and leave the rest, not as a dog in a manger to kick it over, but take it. Take what you can and leave it. Somebody else can come along and take what they can from it. County Cullen. That brought at least some response. County Cullen was one of those delicate poets. He wrote a poem in which he said, I'm paraphrasing, he said, I know that if God chose, he could come and explain why the carapace of the turtle is as it is, or the snake sheds its skin, why this and that. But his last line in the sonnet is so poignant. He says, yet Do I marvel at this curious thing, to make a poet black and bid him sing? A delicate man. You must read. Make a note to read a poem called Heritage. Heritage. But this one I'm going to tell you is called Incident. Once riding in old Baltimore, heart filled, head filled with glee, I saw a Baltimorean keep looking straight at me. Now I was 8 and very small, and he was no whit bigger, and so I smiled, but he poked out his tongue and called me nigger. I saw the whole of Baltimore from May until December, of all the things that happened there. That's all that I remember. Applaud the man. I wrote a poem for children called Harlem Hopscotch. Now, hopscotch has a time, whether it's jumped in Iowa or Chicago, New York or Holland, London or San Francisco, West Africa, it's always dun, dun, jump, dun, dun, jump, dun, dun, jump. Well, understandably, if it's jumped in Harlem, there are a little more rhythms in there. There are some counter rhythms working underneath. And what the kids think as they jump hopscotch in Harlem are different thoughts than those who jump it on Park Avenue. So to make the content fit the structure, I wrote Harlem Hopscotch, which says, 1 foot down, then hop is hot. Good things for the ones that's got. Another jump, not to the left. Everybody for himself. In the air, not both feet down. Since you're black, don't stick around. Food is gone, rent is due. Cuss and cry, and then jump 2. Everybody's out of work. Hold for 3 and then twist and jerk. Cross the line, they count you out, but that's what hopping's all about. Both feet down, the game is done. They think you lost, and I know you won. There's a strategy which we can follow in black poetry. For hundreds of years, black people, in order to survive, laughed when they weren't tickled and scratched when they didn't itch. It was a strategy to survive. Yes, sir. It was a strategy, and obviously it worked. I'm so pleased today to see the young black people saying, no, include me out. Not me, Jack. No more timing, not for me. But it is important to see that as a strategy, and especially for the young people, it worked. People continue to survive in direct relationship to the heroes they have. And there have been heroes who made a fine art of it. Mr. Paul Laurence Dunbar has a poem called Masks. We wear the mask that grins and lies. It shades our cheeks, it hides our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile. With torn and bleeding hearts, we smile and mouth myriad subtleties. Why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but oh, great God, our tears to thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet, and long the mile. But let the world think otherwise. We wear the mask. I applaud the poet. I wrote a poem for woman who's a maid. I know she's a maid. She rides the 8th Avenue bus in New York City. She has 2 shopping bags. And she seems to smile. If you don't know the black features, you would think she's smiling. If the bus stops too short, she goes. If it passes somebody, she goes. She's not smiling, she's extending her lips. So I wrote a poem for her because she's a hero of mine. When I think about myself, I almost laugh myself to death. My life has been one great big joke. A dance was walked and a song was spoke. I laugh so hard, I nearly choke when I think about myself. 60 years in these folks' world. The child I works for calls me girl. I say, yes, ma'am, for working's sake, too tired to bend and too poor to break, so I laugh until my stomach ache when I think about myself. My folks can make me split my side. I laugh so hard I nearly died. The tales they tell sound just like lying. They grow the fruit but eat the rind. I laugh until I start to cry when I think about myself. Poetry, a way of life. It's a fantastic way of life. The love poetry, you see, interestingly enough, in most times when the man takes a photo of the lion, we don't get to see the great beauty that the lion feels, not that man sees in the lion. Too often, when non-blacks write about blacks and love, they write about blacks and lust. There are very few occasions where we see that tenderness and that gentleness and that eye contact, which is so lovely. I seem to be staying quite a lot with these 2 men, but I'll move on. There's a poem by James Weldon Johnson called Since You Went Away. Seem like to me the stars don't shine so bright. Seem like to me the sun done lost its light. Seem like to me there's nothing going right since you went away. Seem like to me the sky ain't half so blue. Seem like to me that everything wants you. Seem like to me I don't know what to do since you went away. Seem like to me that everything is wrong. Seem like to me the day's just twice as long. Seem like to me the birds done lost their song since you went away. Seem like to me I just can't help but sigh. Seem like to me my throat keeps getting dry. Seem like to me a tear stay in my eye since you went away. There's a poem I wrote to a gentleman. Interestingly enough, I dedicated this last book of poetry to 2 gentlemen. How's that? It's dedicated to Amber Sam and the Zorro Man. And they know who they are. But it is my prayer to God that they don't know each other. To a man. My man is black, golden amber, changing. Warm mouths of brandy fiend. Cautious sunlight on a patterned rug. Coughing laughter rocked on a whirl of French tobacco. Secretive, a cat's eye. Southern, plump and tender with navy bean sullenness. And did I say tender? The gentleness of big cat stalks through stubborn bush. Did I mention amber? The heatless fire consuming itself again anew into ever neverthelessness. My man is amber, changing, always into itself. New now, new, still itself, still. There's an Africanism current in Black American life. There are many, and I'll talk to you about this one. In Ghana, where I've lived for many years, it's against the law to call a man a fool. You can go to jail, and the charge is assault with the tongue. Since human beings are human beings and people become vexed, there must be ways of telling a man, you a fool. So, what was devised is something we use in the United States called signifying. Now, most white Americans don't know about signifying, and I just don't know any who know the art, and it is a fine art. You've got to say something without quite saying it. So I have a poem called No Loser, No Weeper. I hate to lose something, then she bent her head. Even a dime, I wish I was dead. I can't explain it no more to be said, except I hate to lose something. I lost a doll once and cried for a week. She could open her eyes and do all but speak, and I believe she was took by some doll snatch and sneak. And I tell you, I hate to lose something. A watch of mine once got up and walked away. It had 12 numbers on it for the time of day. No way to explain it, nothing to say except I hate to lose something. Now, if I felt that way about a watch and a toy, what you think I feel about my lover boy? I ain't threatening you, madam, but he is my evening's joy, and I really hate to lose something. Old people say signifying is worse than stealing. Mr. Donnell Lee, one of the young, marvelous, great young poets, has a poem called Marlina. Another love poem. Harlem's night upon the world, women there are drops of Algerian sand, with joy eyes overworked to welcome. Beauty flows the curves of her natural, hangs on like Saturday night skipping Sunday. She walks, moves the nature way. To a hungry man, she's his watermelon. Go on, Donnell Lee, with your bad self. There's a young boy in New York at 42nd Street who sells directions, 8th Avenue and 42nd Street. You come out of the subway and you ask him, how can I get to 6th Avenue? He says, that'll be about 20 cents. And I've been told that indicates American ingenuity. I call it black survival myself. So I wrote a poem about a boy who shines shoes, 42nd Street. 2 o'clock in the morning, you see him popping that ride. You realize that the money he makes is going to alleviate some of the strain in his family. Either he won't have to ask his parents, a parent, for shoes, or he can of himself buy his own socks or something. So I wrote a poem for him. I better take a sip because it's heavy. It's called Times Square Shoeshine Composition. I'm the best that ever done it. Pow, pow, that's my title and I won it. Pow, pow, I ain't lying, I'm the best. Pow, pow, come and put me to the test. Pow, pow, I'll shine them till they squeak. Pow, pow, in the middle of next week. Pow, pow, I'll clean them till they whine. Pow, pow, till they call me mastermind. Pow, pow, for a quarter and a dime, pow, pow, you can get a deluxe shine. Pow, pow, Say you want to pay a quarter, then you give that to your daughter. I ain't playing dozens, mister. You can give it to your sister. Any way you want to read it. Maybe it's your mama needed. Say I'm like a greedy bigot. I'm a capitalist, can't you dig it? Mr. Sterling Brown is another one of our heroes. Mr. Brown has been teaching at Howard for many years. He's older now, but his work is valuable. He's still alive. People live in direct relationship to the heroes they have. I can't say that to you often enough. I'll talk to you about Angela Davis in a few minutes. Strong Men, Sterling Brown. He takes this title from a line by Carl Sandburg to show you that everything is yours. Everything is yours. Use it, what you can. A great black poet takes a line from a great white poet. Okay? Strong men. Now listen to the poem. They dragged you from homeland. They chained you in coffles. They huddled you spoon fashion in filthy hatches. They sold you to give a few gentlemen ease. They broke you in like oxen. They scourged you. They branded you. They made your women breeders. They swelled your numbers with bastards. They taught you the religion they disgraced, and you sang, keep an inching along like a po-inch worm. And you sang, by and by, I'm gonna lay down this heavy load. And you sang, walk together, children, don't get weary. The strong men keep coming on, getting stronger. They point with pride to the roads you built for them. They ride in comfort on the rails you laid for them. They put hammers in your hand and said, drive so much before sundown. And you sang, ain't no hammer in this land can strike like mine, baby. Strike like mine. They cooped you in their kitchens. They penned you in their factories. They gave you the jobs they were too good for. They tried to guarantee happiness to themselves by shunting dirt and misery off on you. And you sang, me and my baby gonna shine, shine. Me and my baby gonna shine. The strong men keep coming on. The strong men get stronger. They bought off some of your leaders. You stumbled, as blind men will. They coaxed you unwantedly soft-voiced. You followed away, then laughed as usual. They heard the laugh and wondered, unadmitting a greater terror, the strong men coming on, getting stronger. What from the slums where they have hemmed you? What from the factories? What from the tiny huts they could not keep from you? What reaches them, making them ill at ease, fearful? Today they shout prohibition at you. Thou shalt not this, thou shalt not that, reserved for whites only. You laugh. One thing they cannot prohibit, the strong men coming on, getting stronger. Strong men, stronger, 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 stronger. Sterling Brown, don't forget it. You live in direct relationship to the heroes you have. Whites, too, to the heroes. You understand a man's hero, you understand the man. What is his hero? We see today a woman in jail in California. Very important case. James Baldwin wrote to her, we must make with our bodies the corridors from your cell to the gas chamber impassable. For we know if they come for you in the morning, they will come for us at night. And that is true. That is not only true for the blacks, that is true for the whites. We must make this more than what Baldwin calls it, these yet to be United States. Yet to be United States. We will survive together or we will not. The ego of man, the conceit, is that, well, everybody else can die off, but I will never die. It is not so. There are species which have become extinct. It's fearful. I don't like to be a harbinger of bad news. I would like to tell you all that everything is just lovely. Tell you what Thurgood Marshall said in 1954. It's all over but the shouting. I'd like to say that, but it's not what I believe. It is not true. We have a great work ahead of us, and we must take the responsibility of occupying the space we occupy. We must. Let's not have it said that our lives and all this pain was for nothing. Waring Cooney has a poem called No Images. Cuney, Waring Cooney. She does not know her beauty. She thinks her brown body has no glory. If she could dance naked under palm trees and see her image in the river, she would know. But there are no palm trees on the street, and dishwater gives back no images. Another love poem of mine. You notice how many of mine I'm putting in? This is a poem I think all women will understand, and men will too, since they caused the poem. They went home and told their wives that never once in all their lives had they met a girl like me. But they went home. They said my house was lickin' clean. No word I spoke was ever mean, and I had an air of mystery. But they went home. My praises were on all men's lips. They liked my smile, my wit, my hips. They'd spend one night, or two, or three. But that's the point. Okay, poetry. The music of a people. You should know the poetry, certainly, of Gwendolyn Brooks. Miss Brooks is a Pulitzer Prize winner, poet laureate of the state of Illinois, and has been recently teaching in New York, but I'm told she's back in Illinois now, in Chicago. A great, great American poet. If you're interested in poetry and don't know Miss Brooks, you're in a world of trouble. There's Margaret Walker. Just tell me, who knows Margaret Walker? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. You obliged me to read Miss Walker. I hadn't planned to do that, but now that I've got a captive audience anyway, Margaret Walker teaches now at Atlanta University. She wrote this poem in 1937. 1937, okay? Called For My People. It's her most famous work. For my people everywhere, singing their slave songs repeatedly, their dirges and their ditties and their blues and jubilees, praying their prayers nightly to an unknown God, bending their knees humbly to an unseen power. For my people lending their strength to the years, to the gone years, and the now years, and the maybe years. Washing, ironing, cooking, sewing, scrubbing, mending, hoeing, plowing, digging, planting, pruning, patching, dragging along, never knowing never reaping, never gaining, and never understanding. For my playmates in the clay and dust of Alabama backyards, playing baptizing and preaching and doctor and jail and soldier and school and mama and cooking and playhouse and concert and store and Miss Chumby and company. For the cramped, bewildered years when we went to school to learn to know the reasons why, the people who, the times where, the days when. In memory of the bitter hours when we discovered that we were black and poor and different and nobody cared and nobody understood. For the boys and girls who grew in spite of these things to be man and woman, to laugh and dance and sing and drink their wine and religion and success, to marry their playmates and bear children and then die of consumption and anemia and lynching. For my people thronging 47th Street in Chicago and Lenox Avenue in New York and Rampart Street in New Orleans, lost, disinherited, dispossessed, and happy people, filling the cabarets and taverns and other people's pockets, needing bread and milk and money and something, all their own. For my people walking blindly, spreading joy, losing time being lazy, sleeping when hungry, shouting when burdened, drinking when hopeless, tied and shackled and tangled among ourselves by the unseen creatures who tower over us omnisciently and laugh. For my people blundering and groping and floundering in the dark of churches and schools and clubs and societies, associations and councils and committees and conventions, distressed and disturbed and deceived and devoured by money-hungry, glory-craving leeches, preyed on by facile force of state and fad and novelty and prophet and holy believer. For my people standing, staring, trying to fashion a better way from confusion and misunderstanding, trying to fashion a world that will hold all the faces, all the Adams and Eves and their countless generations. Let a new earth arise. Let another song be born. Let a bloody peace be written in the sky. Let a second generation full of courage issue forth. Let a people loving freedom come to growth. Let a beauty full of healing and a strength of final clenching be the pulsing in our spirits and our blood. Let the martial songs be written. Let the dirges disappear. Let a race of men now rise and take control. 1937. 1937. A hero at Atlanta University. As soon as you get a chance, you ought to just drop her a card, Miss Margaret Walker, and just say, I'm glad you're alive. Just, I'm glad you're alive. I tell you, I was given a plaque a couple of months ago by the city of Los Angeles because I'm the first black woman to have written a Hollywood movie and written the score for it. And because I'll be directing a movie in March, the first black woman to direct a Hollywood movie, which speaks less of my talent than of the state of this United States, because there were black women who were writing beautifully when I was semi-literate, before I was even born. There's a woman named Alice Childress who should have been there. So it speaks less of my talent. Mind you, I don't mean to diminish the value of my talent. I'm grateful. But it does not, I'm not kidded. I don't think that it's because at last one finally came along. Baloney, I know better. But the city of Los Angeles gave me a plaque. Beautiful calligraphy, really, really lovely. And I knew they were going to present this to me. And I live in Berkeley, 500 miles away about. So I went into the chambers, and here it was really serious. There were 17 council members, and they presented to me, city members, with seriousness and with some dignity. And I almost wept. I mean, I used my best control. Because in this society, the society asks that artists starve in some tacky garret or be paid $30,000 a week at Las Vegas. There seems to be no mean. So seldom do people simply come up and say, thank you. Thank you for burning the night oil. thank you. Simply that. It means something. And especially when you're trying to deal with a piece of work. It's like Joseph or Jacob or somebody wrestling with the angel all night. You're working with a piece of work trying to get one sentence right. And some young person or old person or somebody sees you on the street and says, listen, I've read your work. Thank you. It's marvelous. Please say that to Miss Margaret Walker. Okay? Write her a note. Just a card. Thank you. We don't know what we'll get as a result. It might turn her on, inspire her to write us another piece like this. Okay? You? Huh? Okay? Margaret Walker, Atlanta University. That's all. In direct relationship to the heroes we have, when you take a man's image of himself from him, you've done something terrible. In many torture circumstances, mirrors are broken. Mirrors are broken. In the concentration camps, there were no mirrors. When a person, cannot see himself, you see, and respect what he sees, it's terrible. Now, Angela, that this woman can be without a hero, a black woman, young, brilliant, dedicated, without the support of her people, because she's something. She does not indulge man-made differences between man. She does not. She doesn't indulge racism on any level. So, when we see this woman and realize that if they come for her in the morning, they're coming for us in the evening, you too. Blonde, you too. Might not be for you that evening, it's you the next morning. It's very important to see the heroes always and give them, if you can do no more, then write a card. I stop them on the street and say, I just thank you for existing, for daring to exist. I told you I was going to talk about everything. You shouldn't be surprised. I'm going to read one more poem. Tell you something about bougies. The black American bourgeois are more tedious, more tiresome than white American bourgeois because they are Johnny-come-latelys. And there's nothing as tedious as a new convert. Some years ago, I was asked to come to a fashion show. And obviously, it's not the kind of thing that I spend my time. I'm very selective about the use of my time. But I was asked to be the guest of honor. Well, I had cut my hair some 20 years ago because I studied dance, and it was impossible to do my work and keep my hair straightened. So I cut my hair. And living in a world of dancers, that was very acceptable, since dancers are madder than road lizards. Anyway. But when I went to the fashion show, the young woman at the desk, the receptionist, nutted out on me. So she said, yeah, what do you want? I said, oh, I beg your pardon. I'm sorry, I was ready to go, but the man who had invited me said, oh, no, Miss Angelo, please come. And of course, I've worn African dress for many, many years, so people nudged each other. And I drank in self-defense, really. So finally, when the show began, girls walked out and they took the poses, and the moderator said at one point, and this is what me lady will wear to the country club. And I looked at that and I thought about Ralph Bunche. Ralph Bunche's son had just been refused membership at Forest Hills Country Club because he was black, and the boy is light enough to pass for Swedish. And here, this imitation, this emulation. I thought I'd write a poem about you, dear. So I wrote a poem called Sepia Fashion Show. Their hair pomaded, faces jaded, bones protruding hip-wise. The models strutted, backed up and butted, then stuck their mouths out lip-wise. They had nasty manners, held like banners while they looked down their nose-wise. I'd see 'em in hell before they'd sell me one thing they're wearing, clothes-wise. The black bourgeois who all say yeah when yeah is what they're meaning should look around both up and down before they set out preening. Indeed, they swear, that's what I'll wear when I go country clubbing. I'd remind them, please look at them knees they got at Miss Ann scrubbing. Phonies. Now, it's terrible to get out of one trick bag and get caught in another. Liberating oneself should, in fact, liberate everyone else to the person who is liberated. And yet one sees a preponderance in the States now, especially on either coast, of witch hunting, what I call witch hunting. I am blacker than you. He's not black enough. She's not black enough. She's not on the case. That's baloney, folks. That's baloney. There's no such animal as a black man who is not black. If he passes for white, that is still a black man passing. That's like saying this is an inhuman act. If a human being did it, it is not inhuman. Obviously. Now, if a buffalo did it, then we could talk about it. It may not be what we would like to see, but if you admit that you are a human being, you must say that I have the potential for doing the worst there is to do, the most destructive. I have the potential for doing the best, the most constructive. I have that potential. It is in me. As in a drop of seawater, all the components that are in the sea. It's a microcosm of a macrocosm. I have that potential. So you must be very careful of these absolutes you draw up about other people's ways of life. You must be very, very careful. I'm talking to the black students in particular. Be very, very careful. I see it as I go about the country, and it's scary. The most dangerous, the most effective weapon ever devised by man was discovered by Machiavelli in the 15th century. Interestingly enough, he was trying to brown nose his way back into the good graces of the Pope. He'd been exiled, so he wrote a piece called The Prince. And the crux of The Prince is separate and rule, divide and conquer. It's a doozy. It works. Come and see colonialism. It works. Look at the black American today. It works. Look at the Puerto Rican today. It works. Look at the Mexican American. It works. Let's not let it work. How about that? How about that? Let's outsmart them. Let's not let it work. I don't mean just the blacks. I mean blacks and whites now. Let's not let it work. Let's be smarter than that. Wouldn't that be something? Can you imagine if those children, those two little ones there, this little baby, the mother took it out there a while ago? Suppose those people grew up in a world where we didn't let it work. Can you imagine what this United States would have been if that Reconstruction hoax had not been a hoax? Sometimes I become so thrilled at the possibility, which is now, of course, too late. But imagine if, in fact, this United States, we United States, had really been able to draw upon that great passion, that energy, that creativity, 56% of the planet. Even divided, here's a corpus. If you look at it as a corpus, you can think of the black American as the thumb pressing on the appendix of that corpus. And bodies have been known to die from terminal peritonitis. Thank you. I thought maybe we'd spend a little time entertaining questions. That is all of us, so maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Oh, you know everything I know, right? I'm directing 2 films this year. I direct Caged Bird, and I'll direct a film of Alex Haley's. Alex wrote the autobiography of Malcolm X. Well, he has another piece, not the large piece, but a piece on Memphis, Tennessee, on a little town outside of Memphis, and I intend to direct it. I'm scared. I admit absolute panic. I just operate in the familiar, you know. Inside, I'm going like that. The girl I haven't cast yet. I hope Abby Lincoln will play the mother. I'd like Robert Hooks for the father. I'd like the young boy who was in The Learning Tree, Kyle Johnson, to play the brother. I have most of the parts cast, but the young girl I don't know yet. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. He's in Berkeley. Themselves. Because Frederick Douglass says if you'll have a man enslaved, you have to stay down there in that hole with him. See? And that action is pushing down, which is a negative, and the action of the man trying to get out is a positive. So, well, a number of things happened, very fortunate for me. One is years ago I heard a phrase which said, I think, it says, homo sum, humane nihil a me alienum puto. I am a human. Therefore, nothing human can be alien to me. That was said by Terence, a Roman poet. I found out years later that Terence was an African. His name is Terentius Afer. Terence of Africa.